Congress and the White House may once again inflict a crisis on the country. By Tuesday, President Trump and Democratic leaders must reach an agreement to avoid what could be a prolonged and painful shutdown of the entire federal government that would impact millions of Americans. Democrats, aghast at what they see as a lawless president, are demanding significant policy changes on health care in exchange for their votes in the Senate. Trump, who has spent the last 8 months in office doing seemingly whatever he wants, including a norm-shattering retribution campaign against political foes that has only intensified in recent days, wants a straight extension of government funding for 7 weeks. And late last night, news broke of a last-ditch meeting between the president and the top 4 congressional leaders at the White House on Monday, the first of this term. So will we see a president who often boasts about his deal-making skills show some compromise with Democrats? Or will it devolve into an ugly clash like it did in 2018?
And the experts say you can do border security without a wall, which is wasteful and doesn't solve the problem.
It totally solves the problem.
And it's very important. This has spiraled downward when we came at a place to say, how do we meet the needs of American people who have needs?
I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it. The last time you shut it down, it didn't work. I will take the mantle of shutting down. And I'm going to shut it down for border
But we
security.
believe you.
And of course, that went on for about 17 minutes in that infamous throwdown there in the Oval Office. And I have an excellent reporter to break down all the news on this critical week. CNN's Elena Train, Jonah Goldberg from the Dispatch, the Atlanta Journal's Tia Mitchell, and Semaphor's Burgess Everett. Good morning to you all.
Morning.
Shutdown week, and this meeting is significant for several reasons. One of which is that Chuck Schumer and President Trump actually have not spoken since January 20th, I'm told, on the inauguration day. And also Hakeem Jeffries has actually never met with Trump. So this will be the first time that's ever happened. But the question that I get, Burgess, we've covered so many of these shutdown threats time and time again. They find a way out of it. Sometimes they don't. The question I get now is, what is the likelihood of a government shutdown? From your sources in your reporting, what are you hearing about the prospects of this? Because Democrats, of course, they have a significant amount of say. They have to give at least 7 votes in the Senate to pass anything here. From your reporting, how would you handicap the chances of a shutdown?
I would say definitely better than even, more than 50%. Part of what's happening here is you played these clips from 2018 when the president was asking Democrats for policy concessions. Now things are flipped, except Democrats are in the minority. So yes, Trump needs their votes to keep the government open, but they don't really have as much leverage as they think they have or as they're presenting themselves. So if they stick to their guns and say...
Are they going to stick to the guns?
Everything we've heard says yes. Senate Democrats will be having a conference call this afternoon, so I'm assuming there's going to be more discussion of this. But so far they are. You see the minority leaders in the House and Senate, Jeffries and Schumer, seem to be sticking together, that you don't sense that sort of rift between them at this point. Liberal groups aren't hammering these folks yet. So it feels like they're a lot more dug in than they were in March.
So take us inside the White House's thinking to have this meeting, because there was supposed to be this meeting between Jeffries and Schumer and Trump on Thursday. Trump called off that meeting. The Republican leader said, don't meet with them. They announced this yesterday. Is this an opportunity for Trump to do what he did in 2018, essentially try to go after the Democrats, or is this actually an effort to get a deal here?
I think it'll more likely be what we saw in 2018. I mean, who knows how it's actually going to go down, but I know from my conversations, at least with people inside the building, is that they don't really see a lot of downside for the president and for the Republican Party overall with a shutdown. We know the president isn't as afraid of a shutdown as we've seen, his predecessors be. And a lot of people in his inner circle and in the West Wing believe that a shutdown will be blamed on Democrats, like it normally is when they are the minority party, and that it could also help them in the midterms. Now, of course, we have to see how these talks go tomorrow, but I think the president really does feel like he's going into that meeting tomorrow with the upper hand and really with not a lot to lose. And it could be an opportunity. I think part of the reason this is happening as well is he wants people to see that Democrats are being unreasonable. That's what he believes, and he wants that to be showcased more publicly so that when and potentially if the government shuts down, they get more of the blame.
And this is what Democrats are asking for in these negotiations, or the negotiations that they hope will happen. They want to reverse the Medicaid cuts that were included in Trump's signature domestic policy achievement from this summer. They want to extend expiring Obamacare subsidies set to expire at the end of the year to help people pay for their health insurance under Obamacare. They also want some sort of restrictions on how Trump has essentially cut spending, federal spending, without congressional approval. I'm going to give in on that. I mean, perhaps they may have a discussion on how to deal with the Obamacare subsidies, but that is a much more complicated issue. But you're hearing Democrats saying that that is their red line. And, you take a step back, they say we need to show that we can't continue business as usual the way Trump has been running things here. But isn't it a bigger risk for them to actually shut the government down?
Well, there are voters that these Democratic elected officials have been hearing from who've said, stop being afraid. Shut it down. We want to see a fight. So in some ways, they're a little bit more empowered to be blamed for the shutdown because there are constituents back home who said, go for it. Now, whether those constituents will feel the same way once they feel the impact of a shutdown remains to be seen. But I think especially people like Chuck Schumer, who we know back in March when we were having this conversation was not for a shutdown, he seems to even be in a different posture now. So I think they are willing to negotiate. They've got what they want. I think they're willing to see where they can meet. But I don't think Democrats are willing to not do a shutdown with nothing in return. They might not get everything they want, but I think they're going to want something, or there will be a shutdown.
And this is why the consequences are so significant, because the White House is threatening a lot here. This is what the Washington Post headline: mass layoffs, deregulation, military deployments. That's Trump's shutdown plans. Eric Erickson, a conservative activist and personality, told the Boston Globe, if I were a Democrat and Russ Vought was in charge of OMB, he's the White House budget director, I would have nightmares about Russ could do that you couldn't undo when government reopens. Russ has waited for this moment in life. The point being is that Trump has, he's taken all these steps in this past 8 months or so, regardless of what Congress wants, regardless of what the court wants. Now with the government shut down, perhaps he can go even further in a lot of areas, and that could even mean these mass firings of federal employees.
Yeah, I mean, this is a briar patch that he kind of wants to get pushed into. I think part of the problem, is that one of the reasons why Democrats are at their lowest approval in 30 years in a generation is because a lot of Democrats don't like Democrats right now. And so that's the weird political vice that the Democratic Party is in, is how do I win back the support of my own party, never mind people in the middle. And the challenge is that they're trying to use the shutdown as a messaging tool to highlight the Medicare and the Obamacare stuff, and also maybe to give themselves this excuse that says, hey, look, we want to keep the government open. We'd make a deal, but the last time we made a deal, this administration the Republicans went and reopened legislation that was already passed and paid for, so we can't trust them. And that is the only silver lining for Democrats possibly of not getting the full blame, is to say, hey, look, under normal circumstances, we would deserve the blame for shutting down the government. But look at all the chaos this guy is creating. We can't trust him. We got to do something. I don't think it's going to work, but it could help. I
mean, the issue is that if the government is shut down, it is so much harder to reopen the government. And what would Democrats get in return if the government were shut down and they led to some negotiation? This is how long the prior government shutdowns have lasted in recent years. We have not seen one since the 2018-2019 shutdown. That was 35 days. That was the longest in history. And then there have been many that have been just 1 or 2 days, a couple that have been longer than that. But that's the risk here. This could go on, who knows, maybe even longer than 35 days.
Yeah, look at that 2013 one. That's the most analogous scenario. Same exact point in the calendar, and the other difference is this would be a full government shutdown. That was not the case in 2018 and 2019. And if you recall, in 2013, you were having things like World War II veterans being turned away from the World War II memorial. I mean, there are ways that this will play out publicly and in all Americans' lives, depending on how the Trump administration implements a shutdown. And I think some of these things that they're talking about, like mass firings and layoffs and things like that, probably going to do that anyway. They haven't shown that there's much correlation between whether the government's open and them trying to cut federal jobs.
and people get blamed. The Democrats, Republicans, and the White House will all share a significant amount of the blame. The 2018, 2019 shutdown, a Pew poll from that time looked at everyone. A majority of voters essentially blamed everyone, even though it was Trump who walked away from a spending bill at that time to keep the government open. So this could be a problem across the board here.
Yeah, again, I think because if there is a shutdown, it's not going to look anything like the previous shutdowns, most likely, because we know the Trump administration is planning to take advantage of this opportunity to do mass layoffs, perhaps to shutter more federal agencies and programs. And so it's going to be kind of unprecedented territory to see how the American people, first of all, the impact, and B, the blame, because it's just not going to look the same. As painful as previous shutdowns were, this one could be painful in a much different way, and quite frankly, a much more permanent way.
Yeah, and the impact could be felt across the country, and the political impact will be, we'll see if that happens, and we'll see what happens in this critical meeting tomorrow.